Welcome everybody to another episode of the Power Hour podcast. We're joined today by Mark Whitby, who is the founder of recruitmentcoach.com. He's the host of the Resilient Recruiter podcast. He's trained over 10,000 people. He's been 20 years in the industry and he now focuses on helping owners increase their revenue and their growth. Thank you very much for joining us today, Mark.
Thanks, Jeff. Happy to be here. And I like the name of your show, by the way, the Power Hour.
Do you feel like there's some things that should definitely be automated and some things that should never be automated?
Automation is a fantastic way of saving time.
I think you made so many good points there. That's like such a benefit of your experience. So imagine the critique that I'm going to get constantly. Everyone thinks they're better than me.
So as a recruiter, you have to be good at just adapting your style and the way you communicate. The best recruiters are good at that, are able to be almost a chameleon and build rapport.
We agree on that, and I hope anyone listening to that, is more persuaded to do that.
Well, human beings need community and they need connection, right?
If you want to go fast, go alone, and if you want to go far, go together. Welcome everybody to another episode of the Power Hour podcast. We're joined today by Mark Whitby, who is the founder of recruitmentcoach.com. He's the host of the Resilient Recruiter podcast. He's trained over 10,000 people. He's been 20 years in the industry and he now focuses on helping owners increase their revenue and their growth. Thank you very much for joining us today, Mark.
Thanks, Jeff. Happy to be here. And I like the name of your show, by the way, the Power Hour. I feel like I liked the Power Hour, but it doesn't seem like people really do that anymore.
I think, it's funny that you're on here, right? I think that the reason why people don't like Power Hours is because they're not trained in sales properly. And so it's like, if you're not doing something that you're 100% comfortable in, you're going to have fear around it. And I also think that there's too much emphasis on the result of the phone call and not enough in the picking up the phone. Because my experience has been, like, I'm not always the number one negotiator, but if I make more phone calls to the right people than you do, I bet I'm going to make more money than you. And that's kind of what I've seen consistently over the years, right? So I loved Power Hour, right? Because it was when I got in, I was like a kid from a council estate, which is like the projects basically, and I was just like, what is this? Everyone's making so much money. We're used to council estates and people screaming and shouting, and going on to like a sales floor, people were still screaming and shouting, right? But they were all dressed nice and driving fancy cars and whatnot. So I kind of just embraced that like massively. I loved it. And I lived and died it, and this was well before that. There was people like yourself. You'd learn everything from the man or the woman that was ahead of you, if that makes sense.
Definitely,
They had full control and dominance over you. They owned you. If you wanted to, as you well know, But I feel like it's a lack of confidence, really, because sales is a beautiful thing. If you can master, you can never master it, but if you can get competent at it, it's enjoyable, isn't it? It's fun. Like, it's a fun 100%. Thing to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we should be proud to be in sales, and nothing happens in business without someone making a sale. So, absolutely, 100% agree.
Definitely, for sure. And so, talking about that, I was like, a long time ago now. I mean, we've both been in the industry roughly around the same sort of time, right? And over the years, what I've seen is that, and this is an observation, but it's also been backed up by some research that I've done. So the average recruitment consultant has billed between 10 and 20 grand, between 10 and 12 grand on average for the last, as long as I've been in the industry, right?
Wow.
So it hasn't, so it hasn't really increased. And there's a lot of different, elements that have come into play. Have you got any kind of an opinion on why that's the same today as what it always has been?
Yeah, I'm really surprised to learn that, because when my first job in recruiting in 1997, my first target was 100K, and then it quickly went on to 10K a month, and then as you became a senior consultant, it would go up to 12 or 15K a month, something like that. But that was a long time ago, Jeff, and with inflation and like salaries have increased about 80% in that same time frame. So you would think that if people are doing the same number of deals, they should be making 80% more than we did in like the 90s and the 2000s. That Otherwise, because if you're billing the same as you did 20 years ago, that you're actually billing less with inflation, right?
Yeah, for sure. But the other side of it is that is there a lot more competition now than what there was then? I mean,
It's
the numbers
interesting.
would
It's
say
a
that
good
there
question.
is.
Like, is this job harder or is it easier? And
Yeah.
it's hard to untangle that because many things are easier, right? We have technology, we've got automation, we've got LinkedIn, we've got like so much easier to find people. But maybe in some ways it's harder because, it's harder to get people to take your phone call or, there is a lot more competition. So it's a good question. Is it harder or easier? I don't know. I think it's always been hard and it's still hard is
Yeah.
the bottom line. But if you're good, you can still do very well at it.
It's consistently hard. It's been hard for 20 years.
Yeah.
It doesn't show no signs of getting easier.
Yeah.
So you touched on something there, which is quite a hot topic across the world, and especially in recruitment, about automation. And I'd done a podcast with a guy called Will Aitken, who was from Lavender AI. And it's all about sort of like how to get your email deliverability up and your response rate up. It was an episode which was solely focused on email. So automation came up in that show there. So do you feel like there's some things that should definitely be automated and some things that should never be automated? What's your idea on automation?
Yeah, great question. So I love automation. And by the way, so Lavender AI is a great tool. What I like about it is it critiques your emails and shows you how you can improve, the response rate based on real data, based on all the thousands of emails that people are sending that are going through their their email system. And I love that kind of stuff because and we'll come on to talk about automation, but the problem is
you just done a better job of selling that product than Will did in an hour. No, I'm only joking, mate.
Well,
really
okay, so I believe that copywriting is an undervalued skill in recruiting, and so you need to be good verbally, and you need to be good at writing and influencing people and persuading people using the written word, because so much, especially these days, so much of our communication is text, it's email, and so, or it's like on LinkedIn. So that's a skill set which you really need to develop. And the problem is that a lot of the messaging, whether it's business development emails or recruiting emails or LinkedIn messages or emails or whatever people are sending out, a lot of what people are sending is crap, to be honest, Jeff. And so the problem is there's no point in automating a message that fundamentally isn't effective, right? Because if you're getting zero response and you scale that message and send 1,000 times more, you're still getting zero response, right? So I think the first thing before we go into automation, the first thing people need to really hone and work at, the craft of copywriting and writing messages that candidates and clients that resonate, that show that you're a specialist, that speak their language and really hit their pain points and, cause them to want to respond to you rather than ignore you or delete your message. So I think that is super important. But then, automation is a fantastic way of saving time. And so what we do is an exercise with our clients is we get them to, first of all, start writing down what are all the things they're spending time on in a typical day or typical week. Okay. And then which of those things are high value activities that only they can personally do? That has to be them that does it. And it has to be them personally in real time that's doing that activity. And so it's things like, talking to clients, talking to candidates, putting deals together, negotiating, qualifying, influencing, these like skills, the fundamentals of recruiting that have always been important, those still need to be done by you personally, right? You can't automate that. You can't really delegate that. But then on that list, there's going to be a bunch of other tasks that you could either automate because they're repetitive. You're basically doing the same thing over and over again, or you could delegate to either a team member or a virtual assistant. So in terms of automation, let me give you a perfect example we just talked about is email. It is absolutely pointless for a highly paid recruitment consultant or recruiting firm owner to be cutting and pasting and sending manual emails, especially because they may be personalized a little bit, but they're mostly sending the same message, but they're sending it to 10, 20, 100 people. And that's going to take hours of time. That's pointless. Why would you, as a recruiting professional, why would you be doing basic admin like that? That makes no sense to me. And so, a lot of our outbound messages, whether, again, they're client acquisition, emails, business development, or whether it's recruiting to try and start conversations with candidates, a lot of that can be automated. And this is the key is it has to be done the right way. Otherwise, it will completely backfire. It won't work. And it might actually damage your brand, your reputation, and people's perception of you. So I think the reason people maybe are worried about automating, either they think it's too technical, they don't know how to do it, or they're worried that, what if I make a mistake and it looks bad or what have you. So, but I think those are just excuses. If you realize the power of it, how much time you can save and how much more people you can potentially reach, you just need to absolutely embrace it and figure it out.
I think you made so many good points there. That's like such a benefit of your experience because I think you've identified a few things there which people are using to kind of resist automation, which is maybe it's going to affect their personal brands in some way negatively. I think that's kind of like one of the biggest things. We don't do things like that. That's just kind of like spray and pray or whatever you want to call it. But what I've learned is that, and this goes back to, I think, the rule of like recruitment consultants are doing the same kind of numbers now as what they was back then, is because there is a lot of technology now, right? But there's less people speaking on the phone, which is another thing that you mentioned. Mm-hmm. But I believe that if I'm not, what I call it, I feel like it's in conversation. That's what I call it, right? That can be on WhatsApp, that can be on email, that can be over the phone. But if I'm not in conversation, I reckon someone else could probably do that for me. Either it's technology or an assistant. And so I was really, really worried about because I recruit for recruiters.
Yeah.
Right? So imagine the critique that I'm going to get constantly. Everyone thinks they're better than me all times, right? Every time a recruiter receives an email from me, they're going to think, I'm better than him. It's just general, like how people think, right? So I have to be extra cautious. Listen, you get a lot of training, Mark. You get a lot of on-the-job training, So, and I'm lucky to be in that position. And I say that tongue-in-cheek, obviously. But I have to be extra cautious because if I'm going to go after the best in the industry and I've got a bad approach, that's probably going to put people off, right? And especially if it looks automated, yeah? And like what you said, the content is key. There's no point sending a shit message to 10,000 people. You're better off sending a really good message to the right people when there's 10 of them. It's about response rates, not send out rates, isn't it, ultimately, right?
100%. So, you still need to be very targeted and considered in what you're doing. But at the same time, a lot of here's the challenge that I see a lot of full desk recruiters and owners of small recruiting firms is that they have the revenue roller coaster, right? They have a great month and then they have a bad month and they have a great month. And the reason is that, of course, as you and I both know, and probably most people listening know, they do business development until they get a few good jobs to work on, and then they stop doing the business development, and then they focus on recruiting, and then they fill those jobs, and then their pipeline has dried up, and then they have to start doing business development again, right? That old boom and bust cycle. So the key with automation is that you can have processes running all the time that never stop, that constantly fill the top of your funnel and reach out to potential clients or candidates for that matter and generate some interest, people that you can follow up, people that you can book calls with, so that even when you get busy, actually filling jobs or delivering, the business development is still going on in the background. It doesn't stop and start all the time.
For sure. And while we're on the point of email, I think that it's a great way to get clients. Email is still a very, very good way to get clients, especially if you're offering them something that they're going to want. And how I've kind of blended that is what I would do is let's just say, for instance, if I've got a candidate that I'd like to, obviously I'm going to have my own personal clients that I'm going to speak to, but sometimes that needs to be supplemented by like a wider search, right? And also I like to be thorough in the market. So what I'll do is I will write out off the back of the conversation that I've had, the actual email. So I know it's succinct, it's going to give them all the information of stuff that they want, it's going to be able to demonstrate to them I know what questions I should be asking the candidate, and also that I'm going to be sending them the right kind of individuals, right? So that whole sales pitch at the beginning of, look, I promise you I'm going to send you the right people, I'm not going to waste all that's done away with. I've just delivered straight away, right? So I've just sent you, if you're in, say, for instance, construction recruitment in New York, I'm going to send you someone who's had less than 2 jobs in 5 years, who bills 500 grand, and live in Manhattan, and you're like, whoa, this is what I've been asking everyone for, right? So straight away, I feel like you get credibility. You can actually get credibility from that automated message if it's targeted right and it's written right. But what I do, because I use technology, and I'm a bit of an old man, right? So I love technology, but I don't wholly trust technology. Is I've got a virtual assistant who's in charge of email, right? And they quality assure everything. And she's been highly trained. Again, and listen, she makes mistakes, but so does every recruiter, right? But it minimizes that. It makes sure she's not sending it to any existing clients. She's not sending it to the person who they work for, right? All of these sorts of things that you're worried about, I feel like they're an extremely valuable employee, these virtual assistants. They're really not expensive. You can pay them over the odds and still be well within budget. And I've coupled those together, and that system works really, really well. So that's also delegation and automation sort of in a little bundle. And I've found that then I end the email with something like, do you want to get a phone call about this guy? Do you want to have a conversation about this person? So usually they just send back saying, yeah, when's good? And then I can go, oh, hello, it's me. And I'm doing exactly what I like to be doing, which is like, I feel like deal making. I feel that's in recruitment, it should be exciting. You should be deal making. And anything that's not deal making, as you rightly said right at the beginning of this conversation, someone else could probably be doing that. Technology could probably be doing that. And they could be doing it more consistently than I am. Because like most recruiters, as soon as I feel like I'm on a deal, my focus is on the deal, right? So it's not going to be maintaining that, revolution of business development. So yeah, I'm with you, mate. I think that we agree on that, and I hope anyone listening to that, is more persuaded to do that. And you can use that automation for other stuff, but email is a good one, eh?
Yeah, and I love how you're already using virtual assistants, Jeff. We're on the same page there, and the combination of virtual assistants plus automation is a total game changer.
Yeah, I think so. I started using the first VA that I had. She's been with me for 4 years.
Great.
And my brother-in-law. I feel like you can draw a lot of inspiration from outside of recruitment. I feel like recruitment's not always the thought leader, right? And my brother-in-law is younger than me. He's got a marketing business. He lives in Bali. He's very well connected in sort of like scaling businesses. And he said to me, maybe you should think a little bit more globally. And he introduced me to somebody. And since then, I've got a little team of them now, and I feel like it's brilliant, And I hate man managing as well. I'm not great at having people around me on the desk, if that makes sense. So
it's really interesting.
Very well.
It's a good sort of compromise for someone who doesn't really want to build a big team, but they do want having more support so they can concentrate on what they enjoy and what they're good at. Then having one or more virtual assistants is a really good compromise, because it's kind of the best of both worlds.
Yeah, it maximises the potential of that person's desk.
Yes.
I feel like a lot of frustrations that I hear when I'm speaking to consultants of like, why do you want to leave? You're doing really well. And it's just like they're bogged down and they just can't do the things that they want to be doing, and they're frustrated, and maybe the support that they've got is not good. And that's one of the big reasons why. So we've managed to create this kind of like commercial platform and infrastructure, and how I've decided that because I've got I'm an individual contributor. That's me. That's just how I am, right? But at the same time, I've got aspirations to build something as well. I'm quite creative. So what we've decided to do is all of this stuff that I've used, the automation, the virtual assistants, the technology, etc., for people that want to go on and build something, we've created an infrastructure for people to plug into that and see that they're going to, and we've got case studies to say, look, this person's done it, this person's done it. And on average, people are doubling their desks. They're doubling their desk and they're more happy with what they're doing. You know, the stuff that they're doing is the stuff that they want to be doing. And when you're interacting with people, that's nice, isn't it? It's a nice thing to do. When you're stuck at a computer, data entry, as I say, copying and pasting is brain dead. It's not for me. I can't live like that.
Definitely.
So we're seeing a lot of talking of technology and being more global. We're seeing a lot of UK recruiters trying to break into the US market. I know you're quite well connected in that market, and a lot of people that you train are in the US market. How do you feel that the UK market differs to the US market for anyone looking to penetrate that market?
Yeah, it's a good question. So yeah, we have probably half our clients are in the US and half of them are either UK, mostly UK. There's a few in Europe. But so we know both markets really, really well. And what's interesting is that not all, but quite a few of our UK-based clients or European clients are actually, although they live here, they're recruiting in the US. And the reason for that is partly the answer to your question, like what are the differences? I feel like I know that the UK market is a lot more saturated. So if you look at the number of recruitment agencies and recruiters in the UK versus the US, compared to the population, it's a lot more saturated here. So that's a huge factor. Also, it's just a bigger market, right? It's a much bigger economy, and in terms of growth and investment, there's just a lot happening over there. And probably the third factor is that salaries are typically higher in the US than they are in the UK, and therefore there's an arbitrage opportunity. Now, the American recruiters don't benefit from that as much because they're living in the US and they have the expenses of living there. But for someone in the UK, placing people over there and make the same amount of time and effort, but you could get potentially a much bigger fee, placing in a similar role and similar industry to what you would here. So I think that is what the attraction is. But, there's more similarities than differences, Jeff. Like there's the obvious things everyone knows, like they say resume instead of CV or, that kind of thing. But when you get down to it, recruiting is recruiting, people are people, you have to, of course, adapt to, the culture and, the of wherever you're recruiting. But actually, I had a guy on my podcast recently called Alex Cook, who's a British guy who lives in San Diego. And he made a really good point, which is that like even within the US, it's such a big country. It's almost like there's different cultures within the one country. So like people in New York are different to people on the West Coast of America. So like it's not homogenous. And so as a recruiter, you have to be good at just adapting your style and the way you communicate to work for the person that you're trying to influence, right? And I think the best recruiters are good at that, are able to be almost a chameleon and build rapport with people who are different. So in that sense, it's not really any different whether you're in New York recruiting on the West Coast versus in London recruiting in New York. I think you can definitely do it.
And even time-wise, like if you're in San Francisco and you're recruiting in New York, for instance,
3 hours
3 hours, and here you're 5 hours. So it's not much difference, is it? I've found that the consistency is about the same. So you can make as many deals as you can here and is what you can there. And like what you say, the salaries are much higher. So especially in recruitment, so the average recruitment, I suppose, like sort of recruitment consultant going into senior will be on about 30k, I would say, right, across the different sectors. And say in New York, for instance, there'll be more on 70k.
Yeah.
right? So obviously you have to take into the fact that the dollar's weaker than the pound, but you're still looking at virtually double the salary.
Yeah.
And I mean, in the UK, I charge 20%, and in the
Yeah.
US, I charge 25%.
Yeah.
And I don't mind saying that because that's what I charge everyone. So, but, so you can get more money from both sides. It's like a compounded thing. So,
That's
yeah,
true.
I've found it to be quite a lucrative market. I do both. I do London and New York. That's basically where I do. And if I get a really good candidate, I've placed in San Francisco, San Diego. It doesn't. If I've got a good candidate, I'll put in the time and I'll stay up later, to make sure that I'm assisting that individual. But
Great.
yeah. So
Yeah, that's
Yes,
I was just going to say that the beautiful thing now, especially, I think this is even more post-COVID, is with people working remotely, and it's really a global market now. So you can really be based anywhere. I mean, the time zone is the biggest limitation, right? But you could be, in fact, we have clients who are British, living in Spain, recruiting in America, with virtual assistants in the Philippines, right? And it's like, but that works now. You can really be based anywhere.
Yeah, my virtual assistants are in the Philippines as well. They're really, really good. And you mentioned there about the remote stuff. I know obviously we've not spoken about that before, but that's another big kind of, everyone's got an opinion on it, I suppose. Have you got any insight on remote working for recruitment consultants?
Not really, Jeff. It's not a topic I have strong opinions about. Like, our business is fully remote. So there is 4 of us in the UK and 2 in the Philippines, and we're growing this year, in both countries. So that works for us. We like it, but everyone in our team it's not their first job, right? People are experienced and, senior. And so I don't think there's one right answer for everybody. I think if you have a remote culture, you are going to find it easier to attract talent because that is what people are looking for. But at the same time, if you really believe in working in office and having people in close physical proximity to each other, then fine. And you will find people who prefer that. And I think especially for young people, I think they should probably be in the office to, because that's you're socializing, you're learning, you're developing yourself. I think if I was starting my career, I would want to physically be in an office. But I think you get to a stage where, why do you have to be there? So I can see both sides of it, but I don't really have a strong opinion one way or the other.
I think that was probably the most etiquette, so the diplomatic answers I've ever had to a question. I'm very, very similar to you. I'll make 10 phone calls to 10 recruitment directors, and they'll be completely different. I think everyone's got to be really focused in this industry and what they do, and it's kind of like you have to feel like your way is the only way, because you have to, because there's so many ways, right?
Yeah,
it's so
exactly.
easy to get like flitter away, So it's good to have conviction with whatever you believe in, I think. And some people I can honestly sit here and say that my experience of it is both work.
Yeah.
Both work. And that's it. And, some people's preference is that they want to build a business where everyone's remote, right? And as you say, all of a sudden they've got the pick of the litter in that case, in a lot of cases, right? They've got a lot more opportunity to, if they're based in London, for instance, maybe the best cybersecurity consultant in the UK lives in Edinburgh.
Right, exactly.
Right? So it all depends what kind of model that people have. Some people want institutionally designed businesses, and for that you definitely need to be in the office, don't you? Because you're hiring academies of rookies, you're training them up. You need your senior staff to stay in the office, because otherwise, who are they going to be learning from, right?
Yeah.
And that that's a model that's going to work for you. And then other people want, again, as I say, like people that they just want to cherry pick the best people, and that helps to have the opportunity to be remote. And again, now obviously there's hybrid, isn't there? So a lot of people say that's the best of both worlds. But again, that doesn't lend to. And what I've seen as well, which really works, is people who are hybrid, but offer remote to people that are more than 90 minutes away from the office. I don't know who come up with that. I thought that was a really, really good, because that's a way to justify it internally, right? Because that's what you get a lot of. You get a lot of kickback internally. Well, she's remote, I can't, I'll be remote.
Yes.
And also what I found is I get a lot of candidates who say to me, Jeff, I've been remote for 18 months, I'm pulling my hair out, I need to get back in an office.
Sure. I can understand that.
And a lot of people slip into that because that's sort of some sort of negative mental health, I would say.
Yeah.
So some people catch it before they go too far deep into it, and the further you go into it, the harder it is to pull yourself out of it. And then obviously on the opposite side to that, some people suffer in offices. Right, so there's all that to take into. So that's a 3-hour podcast on its own, isn't it, Mark? So
for sure.
We should move swiftly on from that.
I think that the thing that human beings need community and they need connection, right? And so that's one thing we're finding with a lot of our clients are solo recruiters, and it can be quite isolating, especially you're working from a home office typically, and you're in your bubble, and you're really you're talking to clients and candidates, but you're feeling disconnected and sort of like you don't have a community around you. So one of the reasons people join our program is to have that network and that community of people they've got similar goals, challenges, and can have those even interact with, get ideas, bounce ideas around, and socialize with people who are like-minded.
Definitely, there's a really good quote. I don't know where it come from, but it's. If you want to go fast, go alone, and if you want to go far, go together.
Yeah.
And that for me, I want to do both, right?
Yeah.
So I'm really lucky. As an office, I've got some people that I can work with, right? And so we go in and I work with them. And like anything like this or anything, if I have to really focus, I'm really lucky that I've got like a proper office, like on my where I live.
That's great.
So,
hey, Jeff. I just remembered, I interviewed a guy on my podcast recently called Sam Brenner in the US, and it was how to foster collaboration in a 100% remote recruitment agency. And this ties into our initial conversation about power hours, because what they do is everyone is remote, but they do virtual power hours where everyone dials into a platform together and they can hear each other on the phone. When someone connects, then they can mute. But they're like competing against each other, but they can also like chat, and they've got that kind of, they're kind of have to do it together, and they can learn from each other and stuff like that. So I thought that was a cool idea.
That sounds awesome. So how do you get access to that?
What, the platform you mean, or?
Yeah, like, how do you become part of that like virtual power hour?
Yeah, it's everybody in the team does it. But I don't know what technology they're using for that. I think there's different ways you can.
No, I mean, so you have to work for their business to do that, right?
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Right. Okay, fine.
Yeah.
That's such a good idea. That is a really, really good idea. So look, I know that you train and mentor a lot of individual, like solopreneurs, if you want to call it that, one-man bands. Do you feel like there is a specific time in someone's career where they should start looking at opening their own firm?
Not necessarily. I think, some people don't want to run their own business, and that's fine, because it's definitely not for everybody. And then others have that desire and that drive to run their own business. And in that case, it almost doesn't matter how much experience you have within reason. I'll speak more on that in a second. But really, it's definitely not for everybody. It's a hard road, as you know, and lots of highs and lows. Even exaggerate. I know recruiting has highs and lows as well, but it's not the kind of thing where you can really switch off. And some people just want a job, right? They want to work hard during work hours, make as much money as they can, but then they don't have to worry about payroll. They don't have to worry about all the other things that, as a business owner, you've got like 10 different jobs, right? So, and it's hard to switch off. But as far as at what stage in people's career, I definitely think you should get some solid recruiting experience. We've encountered people who start their own recruiting business and they have no agency experience. And, typically it's like they have maybe experience in the sector that they're going to recruit in. And they think this would be a great career transition where they start recruiting people in the job they used to work at, right? So we see that quite a lot. They find it really hard. They have people have no idea what this job is really like, right? It looks kind of glamorous and people know you can make good money at it, but it's not easy. And I think it's a shock for a lot of people who are already reached a professional level or a manager level in whatever industry or profession they're in, and they go into recruiting. It's a steep learning curve, and I find it takes them a lot longer to get up and running than someone who has X number of years working in a recruiting agency, either as a consultant or a manager or director, and then they decide they're going to go out on their own. That's not saying it's ever easy to start a business, but that's a much easier thing because you already know what you're doing. You already know that you like it. You already have contacts. And then you're just learning the business side of things. How do you run a business? And which is, again, a different skill set, which maybe might worth talking about. The difference between being a recruiter and being a business owner are very different. And people don't always realize that before they start their own business. But I feel like I'm rambling now, Jeff. So
no, not at all. So what do you think is the difference between being a good recruiter and being a good business owner?
Yeah, it's a different skill set. It's a bit like, imagine you're an excellent chef and you're fantastic at that, and you decide, I know I'm going to open a restaurant, right? That's a whole different ballgame, right? Now you need to do front of house. You're a bartender. You're a kitchen porter. You're a dishwasher. You're the social media manager. You have to know your website, design a website. You have to do your bookkeeping and, the financial management. So all of a sudden you started this business because you're a great chef, but you're doing tons of other things that are not cooking. Right. Mm-hmm. And I think recruiters are the same. They kind of go, I'm a good recruiter. I know what I'm doing. I can bill. And they start a business, but they're still stuck in that recruiter mindset and not realizing that there's a lot more elements here that you need to think about. So in our framework, there's 6 pillars of a 7-figure recruitment business. And it's like a flywheel, Jeff. I'll try my best to describe it, but picture a circle and it's like a pie, right? Divided into 6 sections. So you've got clients, which is basically sales, candidates, team, operations, marketing, and strategy. And you have to be good at all of those things and those are like the 6 pillars of your business. It's not just about clients and candidates. That's obviously a really important piece, but you also need to think about marketing and generating inbound leads and being an authority in your field. You also need to think strategically. You also need to build some kind of team or infrastructure, as we discussed earlier, whether that is you're going to hire full-time employees to work remotely or in office, or you're going to hire virtual assistants, or it's going to be a combination of both. The operations part is a lot of recruiters really underestimate. You need systems, processes, standard operating procedures in order to have your business run like a well-oiled machine. Otherwise, you're all over the place and you're going to struggle for consistency. So does that make sense, Jeff? So you almost need to you need to really level up and grow as a business person. You can't just kind of do what you did to be a successful recruiter.
Yeah, definitely. It makes perfect sense. And I think that if anyone's looking to start their own business at the moment and they're considering it, I would say that the amount of effort that you put into learning how to be a recruitment consultant, how you was perfecting your craft. Maybe you listen to loads of podcasts of other recruiters. Maybe you sought out really good recruiters and you ask them how do they do things and is there any tricks of the trade or whatnot. I found that if I started reading a lot of business books.
Yeah.
I started listening to a lot of business podcasts. I started to mix with more business people, and I started to learn these things. Like what you've just said there, there's a lot more to it than billing on a desk, And that was very, very helpful to me. That was very helpful to me. There was one book in particular that I read. It was called Scale Up. I think it was it was a Rockefeller method, right? Yeah, and I really
that was Werner Harnisch.
Is that? Yeah, I think so. Yeah,
big Scale Up.
Book. Yeah, there was a very, very interesting thing in there where it's like, if you're having problem with cash flow, your problem's not cash flow, it's sales. It's
right,
what leads into that area, you know. And just a little thing like that, it's revolutionised the way I looked at doing business, because the thing of being a business owner is that you just incorporate your business, and guess what, you're the managing director of that business, or the CEO or the owner. There's nothing that you have to, nothing you have to learn. Anyone can just do it, can't they? You know,
yeah, true.
It's kind of like the learning's on the job, isn't it?
Yeah,
yeah,
100%.
Okay, well, look, thank you very much for your time here. I feel like anyone listening to this has been really, really useful to them. If anyone wants to hear more from you, where can they find you, Mark?
So definitely check out our podcast, The Resilient Recruiter. The best place to do that is recruitmentcoach.com/podcast. And if you like the Power Hour and you're into podcasts, then, you know, we'd love you to give it a listen.
Definitely. Highly recommend it. And thank you very much for your time today. Is there anything that you'd like to add?
No, that was awesome, Jeff. Really enjoyed the conversation.
Perfect. Thank you very much.